Hello, everybody. I don't know if many people are watching live, but we're gonna have this recorded for later. I think it's gonna be a really cool conversation about leadership and things that sometimes we feel like we have accomplished a lot of what we wanted, but there's still something missing. And I think that a lot of us feel that way. And we have Jim Bishop here, who's the author of The Adventure Within. I just want to show it real quick. We I said he sent me the book. Hey, check this out. See what you think. I read it. I really thought it was, I really thought a lot of it related to the way I've been feeling. And I think it's good to have this out there. Maybe talk about these things that sometimes we really don't, and we should. So, hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine, John. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here with your audience.
Good, cool. I'm glad you're here with us, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially how you relate to veterinary medicine. Because we at FlareVet are pretty much vet industry related people. That is our audience, and I want to see how we can kind of relate this talk towards that a little bit too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think the best way to start is maybe the origin story, and then we'll move into like the professional stuff and then how that relates and how that connects. But I'm a Indiana farm boy by background. So I grew up here in the Midwest. I live currently in Indianapolis, so that's why I say here. My bachelor's and
Hmm.
master's degree is actually in animal science. And so I had aspirations early on in life to say I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then when I got into school, I realized there were other options that I could use that same interest in and do something with. So I got my bachelor's degree in animal science. And when I chose to go to graduate school to get my master's, a lot of my compatriots were also going on to get their DVM degree. So I was in those classes with students. I stayed in connection with those students. And then with my master's degree in behavior and physiology, I set out to work in the technical side of the animal industry. I did technical consulting for a little while. And while I was in that space, a lot of the people that I were calling on were veterinarians or livestock producers or people that were using our technology. And what that meant was very few of them ever had questions on the technology or the product itself. And most of them were asking questions about their employees. And it was in that moment when I realized this is the
Interesting.
unsolvable problem. Science is
Yeah.
easy, people is hard. And so I
Hmm.
chose to pursue that path and just continue to find what I could find out in there. That led me into a career in leadership development, training, organizational design, career pathing, succession management. And I worked for some really successful organizations, primarily in animal health and life sciences. And so I was always around veterinarians, always calling on veterinarians. And we were also in that place trying to sell some things to veterinarians. But in reality, it was to get to understand what their problems were. And that was really the inside look at some of the challenges happening. In 2020, when the world was upside down, a lot of the clients that I was working with internally became external clients as they decided to leave our company and move to different places. And I just chose to follow them. And that's when I set up my business to be in executive coaching and also in leadership development. Um, but because of the network, because of the people that I knew, and because of the situation that was unfolding around us and all the chaos of the COVID era and all the fallout thereafter, I really became sensitive to the needs of veterinarians. They weren't getting treated very nicely. People
Hmm.
were coming in the clinics more and more and more and more, and just abusing them, abusing the staff, and treating people horribly, and demanding services. And I mean, we were all a little bit edgy, right? But nobody deserves culture like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I started
When you say
seeing,
them, like who do you mean them? Because we usually talk a lot about mental health, and I think you're
yeah,
right. I think that's a big problem right now, and you know, I've noticed that this problem takes effort from everybody in the scale, not just people in the field and people working every day who that have power and have a say, but this has to be from, we're investors, people that are, stakeholders in these bigger companies, and we need these people to be in on it as well. And I wonder if that's what you mean by them. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Like what who do they complain about?
it's a good specificity. When what I did originally when I started my business in 2020 was I just called people that I knew, and a lot of them happened to be people who owned a practice or a clinic, or former customers. And so I just went and spent a day observing. I sat
Hmm.
in the exam rooms, or I sat behind the counter. I went back in the lab and I just watched what happened. Sometimes I was privy to observe surgeries, and I heard the conversations between the staff, the veterinarians, the
Yeah, that's
techs,
when they happen. That's what's when they happen in surgery, right? When
yeah,
you have one-on-one and that nobody else is around, and that's where a lot of the heavy conversations happen. You're right. So
yeah. And I saw customers coming in the front door, and I would see them be agitated. And then the staff did a nice job of putting on a good face and providing customer service. And then they go behind the scenes and they were just burnt and they were tired and they were frustrated. And I saw the veterinarian or the owner or the practice manager sometimes not knowing how to address those concerns. And they would do their best at cheerleading them, but they weren't necessarily doing their best at like leading them through this chaos.
okay,
Right.
right.
And so
Because
then that day,
maybe they themselves were struggling with the
yeah.
situations and how to handle them themselves, right? Like, if you're not in a good place yourself, then it's gonna be hard to handle people that are upset, right? So
Yep.
it's almost like you have to start with your own perspective on the issue and kind of head from there, right? And if you're not well, then how are you gonna do it? So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you've just hit the nail on the head as to the root of the problem, right? Like the owner of the practice or the practice manager, if they were burnt out themselves, they know as part of their leadership responsibility, it was to keep the staff moving, and they couldn't afford to lose someone, right? They were too busy, and too many customers were coming, too many clients were joining. And so, but at the same point, they weren't doing a good job of keeping their own oxygen mask on in the middle of all the turbulence. And so it's just like on the airplane, if you don't do your part, it's not going to work well for those on the plane otherwise, because self-care really at that point isn't selfish, it's survival. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and so I just became more and more burdened by that. So today, my practice, I serve all kinds of clients. I mean, I really do have clients across the spectrum in terms of businesses. But the ones that I'm most passionate about are the ones that I do enjoy working with, or those that are kind of similar to me, or that I understand their backgrounds. Maybe we grew up in similar environments. Maybe we have the same kind of passion to help animals. And maybe we're all caught in the same difficulty of working with people. And when I
Yeah.
can intersect those things, I realize like those are just the fun ones. And so I have a large amount of practices today. Some of them large animal, some of them small animal that I work with. Most of the time, it's a one-on-one situation with the practice owner,
Mhm.
or the lead veterinarian, depending on how that situation resolves itself. And what we're really trying to do is help them keep their own oxygen mask on, find out who they are as a person, and how to put some boundary back into their life a little bit, so that they can be there for all of their staff and the growing clinic and the practice and all the demands of leadership that it has. Once we do that, sometimes we move on to the team, and bring the team behind it with some team development concepts or programs. And then beyond that is like we really start talking about what is the future culture of what this clinic needs to act like and be like, and then what do we need to do to keep that consistent over time as new staff members join, or maybe we scale and grow, or we add new verticals within the practice. I mean, all those things are healthy, but if we don't know who we are when we do that, we just kind of dilute all the things that we've tried to put in. So
Yeah,
um,
it's true. And I've noticed a lot of in clinics, and I'm in Texas. I'm in Southeast Texas near Houston, south an hour of Houston, from Houston. And we're back in the country, we're a little town, and uh I worked at two clinics, and I've in this demographic, there's usually like the one leader that's very strong and makes all the final decisions, and everybody kind of fears more than respect. And I feel like that's a lot of clinics out there, right? Like we're seeing all these clinics in the cities and corporate clinics that are huge, that are the veterinarian is basically an employee, and there's a hierarchy of people, and there's people. But I don't know if the numbers, but there's a lot of clinics where there's going to be the one person that directs, and it's a figure of power and authority. And I've noticed a trend where maybe if we focus on that person, and we kind of reach out, or maybe have a little better access to those people to see what their needs are and what their questions are, maybe we can start creating a culture from that source, right? And I think there's not one answer that's going to help all the clinics. I think we need to kind of see how each clinic individually is going to be functioning, and then target the people that are going to be setting that environment and culture. And the problem, I feel like sometimes the disconnect is that in the individual clinic versus as high as you go, the higher you go, the more disconnect there is between what's going on, who that person is that's leading the culture, and the lines get a little blurry, right? And you have a strong um, staff member that might be dictating things, but it's not their manager, right? Or so I feel like it's very individualistic, and from my experience and my take, I think the people I could probably kind of reach out to more and help be the those people in my kind of demographic, right? Where there's like the one leader that kind of dictates things a little more with a strong management. We need strong staff and management and support. A veterinarian alone can't do it, right? So I think most of us are aware of that. Um and and maybe if we reach out to those people that are kind of setting the vibe and the culture, maybe we'll have a better impact in the day to day, right?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think the practical experience that I have both working in clinic but also in corporate situations is, the symptoms are pretty much the same. The disease looks a little different, basically, right? And so you're going to see burnout, you're going to see tiredness, you're going to see frustration, you're going to see concern. But if we come back to what is the root cause and what's the disease underneath of it, a lot of it is just the individual hasn't learned about themselves yet, and they're still reacting to the world around them. In corporations, if we just have more people and more hierarchy, that doesn't mean we have a more elegant culture or working environment. It can mean that we have more flawed and broken humans working together in a bad place. If likewise in a smaller practice or a smaller corporate setting, I mean, it sometimes just means that maybe that one leader is absolutely a great leader, and we've established a phenomenal working culture, and we can get great things done, but we're having problems growing. And then when we try to grow, it's through the growth pains that we start diluting some of those things, right? And it happens both in corporates, it happens
Hmm.
in private practices, it happens in public industries, and I'm working in that. It's the human condition. And I think the biggest problem at the bottom, at the number one issue at the bottom of all of this is people are so busy that they have forgotten to look inside of themselves for who I am as a person and what do I really want. And so when
Hmm.
we're constantly looking outside for validation from the external world or from other people, what happens is I give myself unwillingly to a lot of things, hoping that someone is going to give me the love and belonging on the backside that I'm longing for. And that doesn't always happen. That's a social contract that I'm the only one that signed that contract and the other person didn't even know it existed. So if I'm trying to prove to my boss that I'm good enough, or if I'm trying to please all the customers all the time, or if I'm trying
Hmm.
to get along with my coworkers just for the sake of harmony, there's a lot of times in that I didn't know myself well enough. I was just hoping that if I did this for them, they were going to give me a sense of connection or belonging on the backside of it. And sometimes, especially in stress, that doesn't happen, right? And
True. Yeah.
the journey is really more about the adventure of learning who I am and how to establish that healthy sense of self so that when I have that, I can be resilient in the midst of any storm.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the hard problem for a lot of professionals, just to break that gap of just saying, who am I and what do I want versus what do I think everybody else wants from me? So,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of veterinarians start like losing themselves in the day to day. I have to say yes to all these things. I have
mhm,
to be there. I have to, know what's happening here. I have to keep every single customer happy. No matter what, everybody happy, right? Or everybody needs to survive and be healthy. Or we start kind of pressuring ourselves to the external things instead of being like, okay, I did my best, doing this. I'm gonna calm myself down before I address a problem. I'm gonna kind of evaluate how I'm feeling, what I'm
mhm,
thinking. Is it myself right now, or is it somebody that's kind of not really the person I should be addressing the situation, right? So
correct.
I think, like you said, we're being very reactive, and I think this problem has gotten worse as things are quicker and instant and faster. And back, I feel like when life was a little slower, I was born in the 1900s, right? Like they say now. So I have my things of more old school stuff that maybe I'm trying to hold on to, but I've noticed that the faster I let myself go, the more reactive I get, and the more, you know, impulsive, right?
Yes.
And when you step back, like you said, and we'll talk about your book a little more here in a little bit, but um, when we start with ourselves and we find out what's important and what's gonna make us happy in the long term, those are the things that start healing ourselves from the present, right? And kind of, not trying to get a quick hit, right? Like you say in your book, not trying to get little quick wins, like a little smile from a person because I crack a joke, but maybe that joke wasn't something I really align with, right? But just to make that person happy, I said that joke and it made us laugh. But then now I'm like, man, that wasn't that great of me to do that. So can you talk a little bit more on that subject, on how we need to focus on the things that are going to create long-term benefits for ourselves versus those quick, and if you can talk about the chemicals and all that, that would be great for our audience. We love that stuff.
Yeah. So you're going to let me geek out in my physiology background a little bit.
For
I
sure.
appreciate that.
Please.
And since
We
we
love that.
have people with a lot of letters after their name, most likely you'll understand these things too. Some of my other clients don't, but let's start kind of with the universal condition of human development. Let's start there, and then we're going to move. I'll explain a little bit about why this phenomenon occurs and then how it occurs. But if you think about it, when you're born into the world, you really had no idea what was going on around you. You just knew if you cried, sometimes your needs got met and sometimes they didn't, right? And so early on, it's almost as if you're an unprogrammed computer. You have no operating system whatsoever. But as the time goes along, it's getting trained. Your nervous system is picking up these signals from the environment, and it sends signals to your brain. It encodes them, and then it stores them, usually as emotions. And when you didn't get your needs met, that didn't feel very good. You cried, and then you still didn't get your needs met. You held that as an emotion in your body. There were things. Are we still live? Jonathan, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Give me 1 second. Okay. That's fine. My wife didn't know I was doing this, so she.
No problem.
That's the stuff that happens. Go ahead.
So I was saying, like, over time, as your nervous system started picking this stuff up, you learned that there were patterns in the world where you felt more secure, right? So probably likely when you went to school, teachers were telling you, don't run in the hallways, don't chew gum, don't say bad words or call your classmates nasty names. I mean, you learned these rules. And what that meant was you learned to show up sometimes around the rules. And generally, there are kind of three ways that we learn to show up. If there are rules or power structures around us, we either go over them, we become kind of more controlling in our nature, or we go away from them, we might become more compliant in our nature, or we try to go above them and we try to get more intellectual or more astute and rewrite the rules ourselves in a different way. Right? So those aren't in and of themselves bad things. They help us kind of root downwards into the ground for stability and safety and meaning. So over time, people develop those probably into really good gifts. If I have more of a controlling nature, I'm probably more of a workaholic. I can get a lot of things done. I can multitask. I can outwit and out-strategize a lot of things. If I have more of a compliant nature to me, then I'm going to be more of a natural people leader and a natural people person. I'm going to more likely bring people's emotions and current states of being together. And that can be a good thing. If I tend to go above the rules and I tend to be more astute or intellectual, then I generally try to solve problems faster than most people and learn more quickly than most. And all of those are good things until we use them too deeply. And it's like a plant whose roots just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the soil. It's not really producing fruit. It's just continuing to root downwards for safety. Now, the universal condition of humans is we are meant to be rooted in our development, for sure. We're meant to use some of those gifts of the way that we started to grow, but we're also meant to grow upwards and produce fruit or be creative in the world and produce things that weren't here before we were here. And most humans are now feeling this tension. I'm rooted for safety and stability, and I'm feeling a call towards purpose. And when I feel those two tensions pulling opposite, then
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can feel like I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Am I supposed to be growing downwards and finding more
Mm-hmm.
stability in the midst of chaos? Or am I supposed to be reaching upwards and producing the fruit that only I can produce? And the answer to the question is yes, both. But only one place does fruit really get bared. It's up in the branches of the trees, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what people are feeling in the current midst of volatility and uncertainty and chaos is the fact that they want their nervous system is tricking them. It's almost as if they were under a big threat of being hunted by a tiger or something. And so then the
Right.
chemicals start kicking in. We start believing that we're in the fight or flight mode. We start thinking that all the blood gets shunted away from the front of the brain to the back of the brain, where the survival instincts and the autonomic nervous system kicks in. Our epinephrine and norepinephrine kick in. So then all of a sudden we our heart pumps faster, our blood dilates, our muscles are able to move faster. But what happens is our pupils actually get smaller. We don't see as well and we don't think as well. So we're not using
Mm-hmm.
our human functions. We're just using our animal instincts, if you will. Over time, then what all that does is cortisol increases. It causes stress responses in our bodies that lowers our immune system. And if enough dis-ease is in the system, then disease starts setting in, right? Our biology starts being influenced by our behavior. And our behavior telling us that we need to run away and get away all the time, being on hyper alert, then our biology starts to adjust and our nervous system kicks down, our emotional system kicks down, our immune system kicks down, and we start getting mentally, emotionally, and physically unwell. Enough of that over time, then we have physical manifestations of disease as well. So tumor markers go up, things like this happen, cancer sets in. And over time, we are now physically unwell as emotionally unwell also, right?
Yeah.
Um, the opposite can be true. If we're in a space of thriving, if we're in a space of creating, if we're in a space of actually putting something into the world, it isn't that we're not under stress. I mean, that hard work is stressful. Anyone who's ever built a successful practice can tell you that hard
Mm-hmm.
work and success, but it does feel a little bit more like significance than success. And the differentiator there is we're above the bar in terms of our reactivity. We're seeing things for the bigger picture. We're doing things for more than just myself and my sense of survival. This is when we take more collective responsibility for the community rather than we do for my individual self and my individual success. When we do that, then the brain also recognizes that differently. That's when we get a sense of serotonin and endorphin and things like that that are giving us a sense of peace or meaning or well-being in our life. So what that does is offset some of those stress hormones, and it gives us a sense that we're in the center of our purpose. We can continue to work hard and long, but because we have a sense of joy and satisfaction when we do that. We don't just have a sense of success, meaning that, yeah, I got the things that I needed to survive, and now I need more of those things to survive, right? So
Right.
long term, this is where the meaning of the book came from was, the adventure within really is about people starting to look at who I am as a person, not what do I want to change around me. Because when we're trying to change the externals, what we're really doing is deflecting some of the discomfort of what's going on the inside. And if I can
Right.
get people to tap into their inner being and how they've learned to show up for safety in the world, then what we can also do is disrupt that pattern of behavior so that they can use what they were good at and not lose that, but just pivot it towards a more creative, more unitive sense in the world where now I'm doing it for the purposes of many people rather than just for my own individual survival instinct. So does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of the people I relate to struggle with all the things they want to do, and then feeling a little bit tired, a little bit burned down, then they have to back off, take a break,
Yeah.
and then feel well enough to like come back and then do a lot of stuff. Is that pretty normal, natural? Is that okay? Is that like do you rather like what's better? What do you think is better for a person to kind of level out, neutral, or do these spikes of like boom boom, create a lot of stuff? Okay, I'm done with social media. I'll see you guys in a week. It's a different for everybody, right? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I mean, I think the question is it a normal? Is it whatever? I hear in that, is this am I alone in feeling this way? Right. And what I would
Pretty
answer that
much.
question is, it's a universal human condition that we feel alone. Unfortunately, it is not a lone symptom for people to feel burned out and have to take a break, right? But on the other
Right.
hand, I also know people who I would say are in the thriving zone, clients that have journeyed with me for a significant period of time, and they've learned to remain resilient in the middle of all the chaos. But the reason is because they know what their boundary is. And I think that's really the key here. I tell people, again, agricultural, but we put fences around our pastures for two reasons. One of the reasons is it keeps the good animals in, and the other reason is it keeps the bad animals out, right? And when we have a
Right.
greater sense of our own sense of need and our own sense of value, we can align those things and now put a boundary around them that says, this is who I am and this is what I do. When we put that boundary around it, it keeps the good stuff of myself inside, and it keeps the
Mhm.
bad stuff of the rest of the world from diluting that. And it doesn't mean that I'm rude or arrogant or haughty. What it means is I just know what I need to say yes to and what I need to say no to. And if I say yes to too many of the wrong things, it lets the good stuff out. It dilutes what's in there. And if I
Right.
keep the good stuff in, then I can remain resilient in the middle of that. But most people, how do you know what's good and what's bad? Well, that's the adventure within, right?
I
Um,
understand. Yeah.
I tell
So we
people,
have to.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
It's really the key. I call it my mojo map, right? A lot of people say they're losing their mojo, and that's why they have to take these breaks. They have to get off social media or do whatever. Well, sometimes yes, but what happens in that case is generally there's a misalignment between what their need is and what their value is. And some people will have identified their values, but very few people like to step into the place of identifying their need. We don't like to be needy. We generally think of ourselves as rather autonomous, right? But
Hmm.
if you probably studied any psychology 101 or something like that in your undergrad years, you realize that there was this guy called Maslow, and he had put a hierarchy together, and they were a hierarchy of needs. And on the most basic level were some of those subsistence level of needs: food, shelter, clothing, right?
Right. Right.
Um, Physical needs. And then there were some needs for safety, making sure that you feel like you're psychologically safe in an environment, or that you have a sense of belonging and community with the people that you're around, or the structures that you're a part of. Then there are some of those higher level needs, the need for fulfillment, the need for self-actualization, but they come at the top of the pyramid. And when I hear people discussing this tension, like, I don't know what I'm here for, I don't know what my purpose in life is, they're looking at the top of that pyramid. The problem is there are probably some of those more basic needs at the bottom that they haven't yet taken care of. That
Mm.
potentially they're not taking care of their physical body. They're not getting enough sleep or exercise or managing their
Right.
nutrition appropriately, right?
Right.
Maybe
Right.
there's some needs for safety where they're working in an environment where they don't feel like they can speak their own authority into the world, or they don't have autonomy over
Hmm.
their own decisions. When that
Right.
happens, then I don't feel like I'm psychologically or physically safe, and the mind just doesn't shut off because I'm constantly operating in threat detection mode. When I'm
Right.
doing those things, I'm burning a lot of unnecessary calories because I'm trying to take care of the things that I don't yet take care of, but I'm thinking about higher level needs. Now, if I'm not getting my basic needs met and I have a value, sometimes what's going to happen is the need will scream longer, harder than the value, and I will go outside of
Hmm.
my value. So, as an example, if I'm not taking care of my physical body well, if I'm not eating well or sleeping well, then I'm naturally more tired and probably not as well fueled. And
Hmm.
someone comes past and says, "Hey, how's that project?" And I don't want to really be truthful with them and say that it's off target, or it's not going to happen, or I'm not getting it done. So what I do is I circumvent that just a little bit by telling a lie. And I say, well, I'm going to work on it on Friday, and it'll be okay, right? And you give
Hmm.
them part of the truth but not all of the truth, and yet my one of my values may have been truth. So
Right.
why did I step outside of that value of honesty or truth? Is because my underlying physiological need wasn't yet met, and I didn't have enough reserves to actually speak the truth. So I went outside, I gave a half truth, and now what happens is I've lowered my standards. I've lowered my
Hmm.
boundaries, and I have a lot more judgment for myself because I'm usually a person who tells the truth, but I know I just told a lie. That
Right.
reduces
Right.
my tolerations. When my tolerations go up, then that means my energy level goes down. And now start that cycle all over again with less energy the next time to make sure I manage my needs appropriately. Right. So,
Right.
long story in that mojo map, it's the number one step is for my clients and the people I journey with to start identifying what are my basic needs that I have as a human being:
Yeah.
food,
So
shelter.
We had a conversation in one of our sessions, and one thing that was interesting is how, at least as veterinarians, I can't speak for a lot of the other parts of the industry or the profession, but um, during vet school, we start forgetting those basic needs, and we start sacrificing those for the bigger goal of becoming a veterinarian, right? So like you're like, okay, I know I need to eat, but there's rounds. I need to be a veterinarian. I'm not gonna eat. I'm gonna go to rounds and do this. Or, I'm really tired. I know I need to sleep. I feel it in my body that I need to sleep. But if I go and tell a superior, I might get some points off or not make it, right? So I'm not gonna sleep and power through it. And I feel like a lot of that bleeds into the profession and the career. So like we're told that it's normal to be that way. We're told that part of being a vet or a doctor is that you have to suffer in these ways. And I think a lot of us struggle with bleeding that into our careers and then finding out a little bit later than we should. Then okay, wait, I need to set these boundaries and these natural needs that I need to have, and find a place where I can work and have those needs met as well. But I feel like a lot of us are too proud to do that and go through that process of like, okay, no, all right, I'm gonna say no to that appointment because I need to go eat.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of a struggle in our experience, I feel like.
Yeah, you're describing what I call the universal condition of the high achiever, right? Those are the people I journey with are high achievers. They always want more, right? And the reason
Hmm.
they always want more is because that's where they generally think I'm going to find this thing called purpose or meaning in my life is by doing more, earning more, getting more, doing whatever. But you said people are too proud, right? Well, behind pride is the ego. And the ego is the sense of self that I've created to give myself stability and meaning. And you weren't even aware of it early on, but I'm guessing a lot of those behaviors that showed up in vet school are probably there earlier on in life. That
Hmm.
someone rewarded you for being a high achiever. They rewarded you for getting good grades. They rewarded you for being smarter than most people or getting more accomplished, right? And so already probably at age 12, 13, 14, 16,
Hmm.
this sense of ego got started. And it
Right.
I'm only successful if I get these things done. I'm only successful if I get these grades. I'm only successful if I'm smarter than most people, right? So
Right.
by carrying that now into a high stress environment like vet school, those patterns or reactivity are just going to continue to show up when you're placed in higher degrees of stress because now the
Hmm.
ego is at threat. I'm not going to be
Right. Right.
successful unless I get the degree.
Hmm.
I'm not going to be successful unless I graduate in the top 5% of this class. I'm not going to be successful if, whatever, but it's it's the if then scenario that the ego creates that causes us to continue to spiral into reactivity. And when all of that is happening, then somewhere in the brain, what we're doing is we're just hoping that, well, I'll rest when I get done with vet school. I'll take 5 years, the fifth year, I'll take a year off. But now we can't because I've got a huge amount of debt and I've got to repay that. So I just throw
Right.
myself into my first job with the same reactive patterns that I had before. And then
A
we're
hundred
like, well, the
percent.
clinic is
Yep.
growing too much. And now I've added new staff members and we have a different practice that we did before. And so with all of that, I just carry the same reactive pattern. And
Hmm.
all the while, what we're doing is hoping for a day or a month or a year when we can just take a break. That's why
Right.
people say, in your case, well, I'm just going to sit off social media for a little bit because I need to cool down. But when they
Right.
sit off social media and they come back, they didn't do anything differently. So they throw themselves back into the same external situation with the same
Yep.
internal being, and nothing
Same
changes.
pattern. Right. It's the same pattern. Yep. Back to back. I think the problem is too, like, depending where you land at that first job, that it's such an important moment. And I feel like we need to prepare the students better in school to get ready to seek out what they would be the best with or fits them the best, right? And I worked with a vet that didn't want really a lot of mentorship. And then I work with vets that are super like that's the main thing is having good mentorship. And then sometimes certain scenarios or environments see this person that is such a high achiever that just wants to work and make money, and then they're like, oh, that's nice, come on over.
Yes.
And if you don't have that right type of mentorship, that could be a problem. The other extreme could be a problem, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's very individual, but I think we need to do better at matching where you're gonna land that first job and how that's gonna go, and how those people are gonna treat that new veterinarian, the expectations. I've seen so many clinics start up with a new grad because they need the license to open the building,
Yeah.
and they have all this support and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know, and then you wonder why they are gonna think that that's gonna be the rest of their career, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that way. I
Yep.
started with 13 other vets at my place, my first job. I had 12 other personalities that were veterinarians that had been through problems, and they all kind of, some of them had more experience, some of them had less, but I feel like I got a good experience of looking at different people, how they reacted to things, looking at the more confident people, just kind of finding my ground on the career, uh, and tools that have helped me be okay solo or almost solo, like, right, like with one vet or solo. I've been okay because of that foundation I had, where I got, a lot of backup and confidence, and just kind of like find your style. But I can't imagine not having that and feeling so lost and so overwhelmed, and then on top, you're a high achiever. You need to make everything go well. You need every patient to survive. You don't have anybody telling you, like my first mentor said, I made every mistake in vet medicine. I'm here for you not to make it again, or to try not to. Right? So if you don't have a person like that, it could be tricky.
Yeah. Selecting your mentor, I think you brought up a really critical point. Selecting the person that you can look to that exemplifies the person that you want to become is critical, right? And a lot of times we'll select them based upon our reactive behavior. I'm selecting a veterinarian who runs a successful clinic, who's got so many new, practices and is always busy and crazy. But on the inside, we've never looked at, are they the type of person that I want to become? We look at, do they have what I want to have? But we don't really look at,
Correct.
are they being
Yeah.
the person that I want to be? Um,
Right.
and that's the big differential. If you haven't learned to better first yourself as a human being and grow yourself as a human, it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to be able to do that for other people. So the mentor may be able to tell you how to grow and scale a clinic, but it may be at the expense of self. It may be at the expense of relationship. It may be at the expense of family. And when that
Hmm.
happens, that probably is not very attractive to people. And that's candidly, that's a symptom I'm seeing in today's environment, is there aren't a lot of students coming out of vet school who really want to be an entrepreneur or an owner of a practice. They want a more balanced job. They want an 8 to 5
Hmm.
type of situation with benefits, and they don't want the risks of entrepreneurship. Well, why? Probably because the generations before them didn't really make it look that attractive in terms of what they gained. They may have had wealth, but it looks
Hmm.
like they've lost a lot on the altar of ambition as well, right? So a
Right.
lot of
Yeah.
the new generation coming into the world is telling people, like, it's just better to be an employee, because those people, the statistics tell us it doesn't fare well for those individuals, right? So
And correct. Especially, I feel like they are looking for emotional freedom and time
yeah.
control. They have control in their lives, and I think a lot of that looked a lot like you're, kind of stuck to that place, and you have
Yeah.
no escape. You're just stuck there, and I was a technician before I was a vet, right? I was a back in Puerto Rico, we call them technicians.
Yeah, sure.
So I saw some vets that were super happy and some vets that were throwing shit around the room, right? And I kind of like, okay, well, and then as time progressed and my mentorship, then I saw so many different people. So I think that kind of experience after vet school is important, and it's probably something that's hard to achieve, and to find a mentor that you kind of agree with and all that. But I think a lot of that starts in like shadowing during high school and that, and undergrad, and kind of, I think if anything, that message is important, trying to find somebody early on that kind of thinks like you, and I don't know, just somebody that you can even pick the brain later, even if you're not working with them. Like if you're in a different state, like, hey, how are you doing? Everything okay? I have a question for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so having that backup is super important to me.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think,
wanted to, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Back to the point of people choosing, looking for more life balance or looking for more wellness, right? I think that the clients that I've journeyed with, there are two types, right? There are those that figure it out and those that don't. They just keep changing their environment to try to figure it out. And some of them may have been in a practice where they were offered potential ownership or partnership, and they decided I don't want that, and they've went to work at a practice where they might just be more of an employee or an hourly. And either one, I've seen people fall from those situations because what was not common was they were looking for the external to validate the internal, right? And if I'm putting myself in a structured environment that says I'm only working 8 to 5, then there's this calling towards purpose, I alluded to. It's still happening, and they're wondering, am I moving anywhere forward because of what I'm doing? Am I earning more, or am I able to acquire more or change more lives as a result of this? And if not, then they still get stuck. Likewise, people who have said, I'm in a practice where I'm offered partnership or on my way to becoming a partner in this practice, they might get stuck because they're still looking for the other veterinarian or the clients to tell them what to do or how to self-author in this space, and then they get stuck. So
Hmm.
the message here that I would share with people is, it's not the externals who are going to determine how far you go. It's the internal and how well you know yourself. It's the adventure within that
Hmm.
says, here is the person that I am and how I bring myself to the world in a way that doesn't deplete myself in the midst of it, right?
Right, right.
So that can be, that isn't a situation or an organizational structure or a type of boss. That is a very specific person who is journeying within themselves to say, I've got to keep the good animals in and not let the bad animals take away. So
Correct. So I guess the main point is really, if we look in ourselves and our what our purpose in life is, and we try to go by that, no matter what where we land, or no matter what external factors, we can probably do well in a lot of situations, right? I think that's
absolutely.
the bottom line.
Yeah. You can hustle and grind your way to success. You cannot hustle and grind your way to satisfaction, right? And those are two different things. Like, can you have lots of wealth and a big giant business and a couple boats and toys in the garage? Of course, right?
Hmm.
And it can be at the expense of you being you. But if you really want to find what most people are looking for, satisfaction, legacy, purpose, connection, meaning, love, belonging, these are the deeper things of life, maybe the more self-actualized needs at the top of the pyramid. If you're really
Hmm.
looking for those, you can't hustle and grind your way there. You have to allow those things to exist in a crazy, volatile, uncertain world that we live in. And you have to be able to be willing to receive them when they come. But if we're
Right.
constantly striving for the next thing, or we're worried that we're not going to have enough for tomorrow, or we're anxious because somebody doesn't like us, those are all things that are protecting our sense of ego, and keeping us from actually receiving what's around us when it's already abundant.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I'm gonna mention the Pacers and Halliburton, because I think that's so amazing, and the way I'm gonna relate, it's how they play at the end of their games, man. Like, hey, never lose hope. Number one, we can always win. I've heard them say that. We know we can always win. We know there's a chance, right?
Yep.
Um, I want to kind of do that as an intro to an important thing that I think a lot of us go through, is how we feel like time is running out, and time is running out. And when you're in your 20s, you don't really think about that too much. When you're in your 30s, you think about it a little bit, right? You kind of like, well, I kind of want to do these things before whatever. And then when you start hitting, getting closer to your 40s, you're like, oh man, time is running out. Like we need to get going here. There's some things I need to get done. So I know you have a part in your book about that, and how it's almost like, well, okay, if you don't have all of the time, you need to make things count. Kind of like what the Pacers do. every pass, every step you take in that court, there's a purpose to that, right? Every move you're making to get to that final shot, right? And make it and win the game. So tell us a little bit about like how you kind of manage that feeling of like, man, I'm running out of time, I have all these things to do. How do you like kind of align that back to your own self and being okay with that?
Yeah. Oh, I love it, Jonathan. You're bringing up so many things. So I mentioned the fact that we go through the first part of our life kind of reacting to the world and just learning how to show up in it, right? And there comes a reckoning. There comes a point in time when we realize, is this really working for me? Is the way that I'm working still working? Um, and you have to account for that yourself on an individual level. And it's generally at the point in time when we get to that what I would call midlife phase. I don't know exactly when that is for most people, but probably 35 to 55, somewhere in that mark, it sets in. And
Mm-hmm.
you may have faced a loss of a job. You may have faced the death of a dream. You may have faced the death of a loved one or a loss of a relationship, right? Something in your life has shook something up and it said, my expectation of reality is not working out like reality is working out, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those two things intersect at that point in time and you have to make a decision. And generally, it's also at that point in time when your responsibilities in the world have increased. So you probably have better responsibility in your career, more responsibility in your social circles, more responsibility potentially even in your family. And
Yeah, right.
more
Kids.
responsibility
Yep.
equals less discretionary time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we feel like that tension is there, what happens is sometimes we can feel like we're losing or we're losing out because now I'm doing all the things that other people expect me to be doing and not really the things that I chose to. The old self said, I'm only safe if, and the new self is saying, but I don't want to be safe anymore. I just want to go be risky. I want to do something bigger or more grandiose. And we're
Mm-hmm.
caught in that moment in time that says, what am I going to do with this? And the message that I share in the book with a couple of the characters caught in that environment is if you're not dead, you're not done, right? I honestly don't care if this moment of reckoning occurs at 35 or 55 or 65 or 75. As long as you have that moment of reckoning that says, my life is worth something more and I'm worthy, not because of what I do, but because of who I am. When that
Mm-hmm.
happens, you can take full responsibility for being like Halliburton and making the last second shot or turning your life around or bringing the biggest comeback in history alive, right? Most people who are deemed a success or have a significant amount of significance, or they're maybe like a legacy person, a legacy leader that we refer to, they really didn't get started until they were 45 or 55, maybe 65. The
That's a
books that
good
we
point.
read, the ones that
Yep.
endure, the stories that we tell, it's not because they lived their life on the mountaintops. It's because they had enough valley experiences to know in the last minutes what shots did they have to take and which shots could they overlook. They have enough wisdom and experience to know how do I make these moments that I have matter, not just how do I have a lot of moments. Um,
Right.
and I think it's in those places that we really wrestle. And people are feeling earlier and earlier and earlier, maybe because of Instagram or whatever, that they're missing out. They're missing the mark. And so they just keep getting more and more and more reactive because when we're in a sense of loss,
Mm-hmm.
we just do more of what we already know worked. And sometimes what's working isn't really working. And we're just spinning our wheels. And that's why they say they feel stuck because my effort doesn't equal my output. But there is a point in time when I tell people it's kind of like learning to drive. If you ever drove a manual transmission and you could
Yep.
drive a long ways in third speed, you could really kind of cruise along. The engine works a little harder and it gets a little hotter, but if you push the clutch in just a little bit, you can find fourth gear and you can probably find overdrive in fifth gear. And what happens is when you push the clutch in, the motor didn't slow down. It just allowed the transmission to shift. And that means the engine works less hard and you go faster. And you push the clutch in, the engine works less hard and you go faster. So
Mm-hmm.
at these moments of transition in people's lives, it's just learning how to push the clutch in and find the next gear. But oftentimes we just want to keep doing what we're doing because it's kept working and I'm too afraid to push the clutch in because I think I'm going to slow down. So
That's a
sometimes
good point. Yeah.
those pregnant pauses in our life, the transition points, the things that we
Mm-hmm.
call pain, those are just an invitation to say, how do we push the clutch in and find a different gear?
That's a really, really good way to put it. It's almost like I feel like sometimes we put off some things and life kind of like catches up to that, and it's almost like what you're saying about the clutch, right? Where I'm like, okay, well, I know I need to do that, and then like life is like, you have to do it now, and you have to decide now if that's important or not,
Yeah.
and it happens in a few times in our lives, and I think it happens in our jobs too, where um you are getting to a point where, like, I've always wanted to do the surgery. I'm getting to the point where I have to decide, am I gonna do it or not, right? And part of us wants to be safe and be like, oh, I'm good with what I do, I don't know. And part of us is like, yeah, I want to learn more stuff, and that's what has made it exciting all this time.
Yes.
um so I think that happens in work and life too, right? Where it's like there's this thing that I need to do, and there's time's running out. But I think at the end of the day, it really starts in how much we believe in ourselves.
Yeah.
And you know,
It is
I,
a it is a belief, and also I would call it a bet on yourself, right?
hmm,
Like the bet
yeah,
that you are not finished, the bet that you are worthy, and the bet that you are strong and capable to do hard things. And in a world where we don't have a lot of external support or a lot of strong relationships, it's hard to hear that for ourselves because the inner critic is so loud sometimes. You're not good enough. You're
true,
not smart
yeah,
enough. You'll never succeed. Stay here for
hmm,
safety. Stay here. If you leave this job or move to this place, you're going to die and live in a van down by the river, right? It's all the crazy
right,
thoughts we have.
right,
And in reality, is those crazy thoughts are kind of fueled by what I call the dopamine addiction, right? We've got so busy doing things. It's the rat in the race. It's the rat in the
hmm,
maze. And when it gets to the end, it gets the reward. And we just keep running the race for the reward at the end of the maze. But
yeah,
we're not
yeah,
really thinking about, well, why is the rat in the maze in the first place? Is that really his purpose? No,
hmm,
he was put there by someone else, but his purpose is actually to go procreate the species and perpetuate. And he's never going to do that unless he gets out of the race, right? Gets out of the
right,
maze. This dopamine addiction is a real thing. We've conditioned
hmm,
ourselves for the stimulus response, and we just do it faster and faster and faster. And it gives us a temporary sense of satisfaction. When I answered the email or responded to the client or did the surgery. But
right, right,
it's in those quiet moments when we're like, but what's that really about? And what would I do if I
mhm,
didn't do that? And how would I rise above that dopamine to find this thing called serotonin or endorphin, which really is a sense of flow or peace or joy that I'm looking for, right?
right.
Um, but in order to do that, you have to pull yourself out of the maze for just a little bit and let the brain kind of cool down.
Yeah, it's like when we start just looking forward to the weekend, right? And just kind of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay, it's Friday, but then by Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, we're back to Monday, man.
Yeah,
Right? So, I've had times in my life when I get stuck in that, right? Where it's like, okay, by Friday we'll be okay, right? Instead of finding purpose in that Monday through Friday as well, and
yeah,
making it where every day there's something that makes you feel good about that day, and kind of, there's gonna be problems. You need to kind of start with your perspective on things, and make it a better week, so that the weekend is just part of that same energy. um I don't know, I feel like a lot of us do that too, like just looking
yeah.
forward for the day off, right?
I think
So
the a way I would summarize it is there's kind of two competing structures of the brain, right? One of those is a problem or threat detection response. And if we're wiring ourselves to go detect threats and find problems, then we live in fear a lot of the time because we're constantly looking at how do I stay safe? And the
mhm,
brain kind of hunkers in and holds on. The other one is a brain structure that's guided by purpose or guided by vision. And if we have a sense that where we're going or what we're trying to get accomplished in life is bigger than ourselves, then we're able to kind of prioritize where does this threat or this problem fit in? And is it even something I need to be focusing on? And the yeses become yeses and the nos become nos. And yet, once we do the hard things that are moving us towards that purpose, we don't get consumed by all the little things that distract us from it. And then that gives us a sense of peace and meaning. And we are able to more be on alignment with our purpose. Um, and I don't mean it to be too Pollyanna or idealistic, but there just aren't enough people out there who have taken the time to identify what is it that only I can do and I can do better than most. I was placed on this earth at this point in time, and there is no one else with DNA like me before or again. So
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a reason that you were put here to do something specifically different than everyone else, right? And if we
Right.
take responsibility for kind of leaning into that, and we do only that, and we do it better than most, it's not being arrogant, it's not being haughty, it's just achieving the thing that we were designed to do first. And that
Right.
may have been be a veterinarian, but it may be very specifically within veterinary medicine. Are you called to put together FlareVet to say, let's deal with this thing called mental health and wellness in our
Mm-hmm.
veterinary community? And when someone like Jonathan steps into that place and says, this is uniquely what I can do better than most, I'm guessing you don't do this because you get paid a lot of money for it. You do
Mm-mm.
this because you feel like you're putting your finger in a bigger problem that's solving humanity, right? And when we
Right.
do that
Correct.
and only that, then guess what? People are attracted to that. And there's also a way to say, this is my meaning and purpose in life, right? So
True. Yeah. That's exactly it. It's not about me or what I'm getting from it. It's about feeling like I'm contributing in the best way I can, right? And
yeah,
and maybe I have the I don't know. I like doing this. Like that this call today was great. I like doing this kind of thing. So I'm hoping that it reaches the people it needs to, whether it be now, a year from now, 5 years from now. I don't care. I want to create conversations like these that might trigger more conversation and might trigger more, impact in the people that are actually looking for it. Because there's not a lot of people out there reaching out for this yet, but maybe 5 years from now, right? I see a lot of people doing a lot of the same things, and I hope that in the next 5 years we all kind of come together and kind of start contributing more with each other. I see a lot of like separate, boom, 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 this person, that person, instead of like, okay, everybody, how do we combine all of this effort into a bigger umbrella that's going to reach the people that are looking for it? How are we going to do this? Um, I think the people that are out looking for revenue are not going to really be thirsty for this kind of thing, right? As much as the people that need to listen to it and hear it out. So I'm glad that we have technology to reach out to people and record conversations like these. And slowly, by word of mouth, maybe it'll get out there. People will start contributing with each other, and kind of like I know everything starts with the adventure within, but I think eventually, as we build community with each other, once we find that common purpose and common ground, I think it's a synergistic thing where, we have a conversation like this. Oh yeah, I think that sounds good. Maybe, I somebody might agree with 5% of it, but that 5% might trigger change and impact, right? So
yeah,
that's kind of how, after reading your book and kind of like trying to digest what's going on with me, it's pretty much how I see how it's kind of playing out, and
yeah,
it kind of, your book helped me kind of reinforce that sense of, yeah, you need to be safe, but there's something bigger out there that you're, you're telling yourself that you need to go do it, right? And you
yeah,
you can't just, you have to listen to that voice. You can't just like be safe, because you might regret it later.
yeah.
It's
I
how I
love that.
feel. Mhm.
Let me turn the table just a little bit and let me ask you some questions. So you've read the book and you've obviously
Yep.
had some reflections and you know the
Yep.
style of the book. So for those that are listening, they don't know that yet, but it's not a how-to book. There's not like 16 steps. What it is stories, just stories of three clients as they move through their own individual journeys. And some of them
Mhm.
choose to pursue where they want to go in the world, and some of them get scared in the journey along the way. So, John, let me ask you, like when you read this, what type of the character did you resonate with when you first read it? Like who did you see yourself in and for what reasons?
um Let me make sure I don't say the name wrong here,
Yeah. Scott,
but
Susan, and Mike are the three characters. I don't,
they're high achiever, Mike.
yeah.
Yeah, him.
Okay.
For sure. That person that always found a way to be the best at what they do, and always achieving success, and still kind of like noticing that other parts of their lives weren't being taken care of very well, right? Like in school, like I did school really well, I got a job, I did my job well, but I lost my personal part along the way a little bit, like just how important family is and community, and how to not try to control everything around you and control other people and the people you're around, and not to try and make things happen your own way, but to be able to manage that sense of control and letting things go and accepting a little more. And I think part of it is accepting yourself first, and accepting that you're really good at that part, but you may not be that great at this. And when you accept that and you're good with that, then I think you can improve that thing. And
Yeah.
I think that was a big thing that I saw in that character, that, there's a little shift, I think, with his family and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. In Mike's case, he was his symptom, or at least let me say the character that Mike is built on. His symptom when he came to me was his calendar was too full and he just couldn't have time and he didn't get to his hobbies. And he was now his grandchildren were around and he was finding himself not spending as much time with them as he wanted. The
mhm,
character that Susan is based on, right? Susan came to a situation in her own life where she realized she was going to lose employees because she was trying to control them too much. And she just couldn't control everything anymore. And she was burning herself out in the middle of it all. So
right.
everybody came to a moment in time when they said, okay, what's working for me isn't working for me. What was your moment in time when you came to a place that said, this isn't working for me?
I think more in the personal side, I started noticing how, I thought I was doing everything fine and great until I have a person in my life, that I love, and it's my wife, that is like, hey, dude, she'll tell how it is, right? Like, you're missing this part, you're missing that part. And I think that was my moment of realizing that I wasn't perfect. I wasn't, something needed to change, and,
Yeah.
and and you always blame things externally, that happening, this happening, that happening. But once you start working on how you see life and how you react, I think that's when you can start, kind of bringing that around a little bit.
Yeah. That's a good perspective. And that's exactly the reason the title of the book, right? Is I even bring it up in the book as a concept of the what I call the leadership mirror. The things that are bothering you and other people often are telling you more about the things you're uncomfortable with in yourself, right?
A
So
100%.
you
Yep.
you've mentioned that. What was going on in your environment that you were not okay with anymore? That you said these things are agitating or concerning to me.
I feel like I noticed that I felt like I had too much going on, and I was putting more importance to my work and my job, and instead of the things that in my own values were more important, which is family.
Mm,
So I kind of had to like realign my perspective and looking into my values, growing up as a kid, what was important in my life. And I time and again saw that family is the core, and I kind of was fighting that sense of belonging in my own family circle, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so that's kind of how,
Perfect. Now I'm going to ask you a next question. Like I journey with people for sometimes 9 months, sometimes a year. I've developed a coaching cohort program now where we do 16 weeks together.
mhm.
So when people are in that place and they're looking for solutions, I've tried to provide solutions, but you found a way to get through that place and you used your own solution. So what did you use to help you come to this understanding beyond what is current and what am I frustrated with, but what is future and where do I want to go?
I think, well, part of, you asked me before, like what happened and what moment did you decide to change. And actually, there was a time where we had the perfect team in the clinic that I was managing, and we had some fallouts, and I finally had a chance to have a new job. And I think at that point, I was able to be in control of what I needed in that environment and be strong enough to say, this is what I need to provide time for my family and be close to them as well. You can either take it or leave it. And in the past, I would have been like, no, whatever you say, right? So I think that's a big part of it as well,
Yeah,
where
I
you
hear it.
learn how to
I hear it.
accommodate what's important for you, and that's where you start, like, you feel like free.
Yeah. I hear those first two steps in that thing I said, the mojo map, right? One was you identified your need. I have a need for belonging, and I want that
Hmm.
belonging to be aligned with my value of family. I don't want to belong to the clinic or the team of just the clinic. I like that, but the value of family is important. So I need to bring the need of belonging and my connection with family, my value of family together, and then I could put a
Right.
boundary around it. And I heard you say I was
Hmm.
willing to say this, where before I wouldn't have been able to say this, right?
Right.
My yes is my hell yes now, and my no is my
Hmm.
hell no, but there are no more middle grounds. That boundary is
Exactly.
strong enough. Now let's
Yep.
take it to the next level. As you did that, and as you created that sense of boundary and said stuff, what happened to your sense of personal satisfaction or pride, your self-esteem, if you will?
I'm gonna put like one example that's really easy is when you say no to an appointment that normally you would have said yes. I feel so much better. I'm like, yes, that's thanks, dude.
Yeah.
Finally, like you're doing the things that are actually in line with how you feel, right? And then I feel like I have more energy for the next case because I didn't force in this, yes, and I was able to say no. So
Yeah.
I think that's a small example of a bigger picture thing where somebody comes with a question. Normally, you would try to rush the answer and kind of get frustrated. Now it's like, hey, I need 2 minutes. I'll be right back. I promise. I heard you, and I'll be right back. And then you feel like, okay, whew, that's a big relief. I can finish what I'm doing and then go back to that person. And those little moments, right, mean a lot, in the long term, in the daily.
Absolutely. You've just illustrated the point where once I have a higher standard or a higher boundary, now I have a higher standard. When I have a higher standard, my sense of self-respect goes up, right? Like when you
Hmm.
said, dude, thank you, dude, right? I'm assuming
Yeah.
you're talking to yourself. Thank you,
Right.
John, for
Right.
giving me this boundary, right? Thank you,
Yeah.
John, for protecting my peace, so to speak.
Hmm.
Once you did
And,
that, now the things that were leaking out or your tolerations got much less. You were tolerating people getting little bits of your time, and you no longer tolerated that. When I don't let my energy leak out, now my reserves are there. Now I have
hmm.
a healthy dose of insurance, if you will, to draw upon when things get crazy or busy, when I
Correct.
am a little frenetic and I don't get depleted in the middle of all that, right? So
Hmm.
you've just gone all the way around the mojo map by illustrating this story. I love it. But you
And
didn't
and
even know that.
and I think when you do that and you save those little energies, then you feel like you can provide that to the things that matter also, like
Yes.
your family, and that where you would be like a little irritated by something your kid did. Well, maybe now you have the energy and the patience because you set those boundaries at work. Now you have that energy to deal with the stuff that is important to you, and you're not like, oh man, I left out all that energy to work, which is important, but where my values really are here at home.
Yep.
So
I, the visual, it's included in the book. You probably saw it, but there's a circle and it has the circles of what you just talked about that goes around it, right? And
yeah.
I tell people to lay that on the table as if it were in the plane on the table. And you can do two things. If you go around this in a positive cycle, like we've just illustrated, you are not just going around the circle, you're actually spiraling up, right? You're calling
Right.
yourself to a higher and higher place of purpose because you're protecting your reserves, and you have more of those reserves to use for more difficult things as you move upwards.
Right.
But if you're going around that in a negative sense, meaning you're not taking account for your own needs, you don't align it with your values, you lower your standards, you lower your self-respect, you increase your tolerations and let more energy leak out, then what happens is you are spiraling down. And as you get more and more and more depleted, eventually you feel like there's nothing left and I just can't do this anymore. And it's not
Right.
necessarily depression, it's just exhaustion. Like I
Hmm.
can't do what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
And people often say, how do people find you? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, most of the people find me at the place where they realize what's working for me isn't working for me anymore. It doesn't mean we need therapy, and it doesn't mean that we're broken. What means is we just have to start learning how to spiral up rather than spiral out. Right. So
Right. Well, I think I don't want to take more of your time. I know, we're both probably have like 10 more things to do,
Yeah.
like the high achievers we are. I'm assuming you are too. I mean, you seem like it too.
I'm a
But
recovering high achiever, John.
good, good. I think exactly that's a good way to put it, because we're never gonna stop being that, right? We just need to manage it well.
We just need
Um,
to use our powers for good and not for evil, as Spider-Man's uncle told him.
correct. Well, I'm gonna show the book one more time.
Awesome.
And then I wanted to see if you wanted to share a website or, something that you want people to kind of get more information about what you do and your services, and not just your book, right? You have a lot more than that to offer. So tell us a little bit about that, and then I think with that we'll close up here.
Yeah, if people are interested in kind of joining along in this crazy adventure, I think the first place I'd send you, I have a website, conjunctionleadership.com. Admittedly, it's good. It's whelming, I would say. It's not overwhelming or underwhelming. The place that you're going to find the most authentic part of me is on LinkedIn. And I journal, blog, put leadership tidbits up there. I even offer free courses for people to be able to take some coaching. So we have one that journeys. John participated in it. We journey through the adventure within just for 3 sessions, 3 unique individual sessions. It's called the First Adventurers Club. That's a completely free experience. If someone wants a copy of the book and wants to learn about what does this look like and how do I start my journey, I think that's a great place to start. Beyond that, I also offer a 16-week, 8-session program, and it's called the Mojo Dojo. These are for high achievers who are kind of caught in limbo and saying, I want more, but I don't know how to get there. So in 16 weeks, we're going to disrupt some of those patterns enough that you're going to be able to say, how do I break free from it and find the peace or joy or satisfaction or meaning that I actually want in life? And how do I start spiraling up rather than spiraling out? Beyond that, I also offer the executive one-on-one coaching session. And that's candidly my cream of the crop offer, very customized, very intensive towards you, when you want to meet, how you want to meet, and what you want to talk about. And it's really designed for you to get to the place where you want to be in life, in career, in meaning, really in all of it. And so depending on how people want to engage, I've tried to tier my offerings to the point where almost anybody can. It's just really the leaning into the individual calling to say, am I ready to become something that I know I'm meant to be, but I'm afraid to? And if you step into that place, you're going to find everything that you're looking for. If you shy away from it, you're going to probably feel the continual sense of frustration or stagnation in your life, because this thing called calling towards purpose is always going to be in tension with the anchoring for safety.
Interesting. Yeah, that we all like safety, but we need to find a way to get a little bit away of that to be what we're meant to be, I think.
Absolutely.
But all right, Jim, I really appreciate you sitting down with me, having this talk. It's gonna be recorded and available. Whoever's watching it, recorded. Thank you. Thanks for listening to us, and hopefully this it's a start for many more conversations.
Please reach out anytime. I'm always a friend to the vet community, and I love to make sure that we're not just treating animals well, but we're treating ourselves well as we treat animals well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll talk later.
Okay, bye-bye.